Time for the annual look at my favorite video game of all time, Genshin Impact. A game that even after half a decade somehow feels the same as the first day of its release, despite seemingly having 5 times more content to play with. Fontaine gave me a bit of hope when I played it last year. The story was an overall improvement compared to the rest of the nations. It had its issues, but overall it was an amazing experience. The exploration also had improved by the addition of a whole underwater segment, letting players get immersed in something new and never seen before in Genshin. Albeit far from perfect, Fontaine left me hopeful that the game might have finally started to progress for the better. Now, with Natlan, the nation I have been looking forward to the most, I started to wonder what new experiences did Mihoyo make for the Land of Fire, for the Land of War. Well, come to find out, Natlan was mostly rocks. Many and many and many rocks and Pokemon for some reason. For many years now, fans have been saying how people play Genshin mainly for its story. And whilst I will talk about the story a bit later, I firstly want to look at the actual gameplay in this game. I am sad to say that the game I have played in 1.0 is no more different than the game I am playing right now in 5.3. Do you see this team? This Hutao, Zhongli, Raiden and Nahida. This team is what I have been using for the past 3 or 4 years. Before Nahida released, I think I used Bennett, but after she came out, this team has rarely changed. You know what's even more interesting? This Hutao has had this exact same build since 2021, made exactly 1 week after she released. Same for the other 3, their builds were made within a couple of days of me getting them and without any pre-farming or whatever else. So why exactly, in 2025, can I still finish everything in this game with these 4 characters without needing to upgrade anything? Everything is incredibly brain dead easy, outside of the Abyss, that to this day is just a showcase of how much time or money one has wasted. Good luck 3-starring 412 without being stuck to the chair 24/7 or spending $300+ for a character that will be power crept in 6 weeks. And even if you did 3-star everything in the Abyss, your reward is 60 Primo Gems. Was all that time and money and effort worth 60 Primo Gems? I don't think so. And while we are on the Abyss, why are there still 0 changes to it since day 1? Is it that difficult to implement a couple more floors to it? The endgame has remained as stale as it has always been. As much as I don't like playing it anymore, Star Rail implemented quite a few endgame modes early on and even updated some of the older ones. Is the average player going to play Swarm Disaster after the first couple of times? Probably not, but at least the option is always there if you want to try it out again. Genshin has only the Abyss and the Theater. That's the only endgame that has been added for the last 5 years. But then again, what good is endgame if you don't have any characters to use for it anyways? Imagine me coming back to the game after a year, excited that I put Mavuika and wanted to build her as fast as possible, only to be reminded that this game has materials locked behind certain days. I go to her talents and oh no, I can't do anything to level them up because it isn't Monday today. Same thing with weapon materials. You finally manage to pull the cool 5-star weapon, only for you to find out that you won't be using it for the next couple of days. And worst of all is the boss materials. Why in 2025 are we still restricted to only beating the boss once per week and hoping it drops what we need, or hoping that we have a crystal to at least exchange the piece we do not need? Why does every other Mihoyo game not have those issues, yet Genshin Impact to this day has them? Well, aside from inconveniencing the player and wanting them to keep coming back, and then you add the still incredibly low energy count, admittedly better than what it was back in the day, but at the same time, everything is better than 120 energy per day. The agonizingly boring gameplay loop of clicking E 4 times in a row and then right clicking again and again and again and again until the NPC is finally dead, and the general lack of things to do or build towards doing, the gameplay part of this video game feels more like a chore than actual entertainment. Exploration is disappointing this time around too, not only because this nation is pretty much only rocks everywhere, but because the general promise of what Natlan should have been isn't there. Way back when, there was a trailer that gave vague descriptions of what to expect from every nation, which till Fontaine were all pretty accurate. So when Natlan, the Fire Nation, is also described like a land of war, you begin to have some expectations. The place being in ruins, craters everywhere, destroyed buildings, volcanoes, lava all around the place, camps being set up everywhere by different warriors. Yet what we got instead is a happy-go-lucky tribalistic nation with a giant arena in the center. Surprisingly, Inazuma managed to do the war-torn atmosphere quite a lot better. I can actually believe that the nation was at war. The story may have failed to convey it, but the map sure did. Not one instead is just rocks and mountains. The fantasy of a war-destroyed world being taken away from me also ruins my motivation to explore this place, especially considering that to reach most places you need to climb tall mountains for 20 hours. Me seeing the mountain in the horizon doesn't make me excited as to what may be on the top. It makes me want to turn away and go somewhere else that won't require me to stare at my character huffing and puffing for 15 minutes, while also having the possibility of my stamina running out and me falling down, ruining all the progress I have previously made. I know that we have the dinosaurs now, whose only gimmick is to make climbing easier, but even then, you can still run out of energy before reaching the top. Same goes for the Natlan characters that have movement abilities specifically made for this area. No one else has these quality of life abilities aside from the new Natlan ones though, because you know, money. Stamina has always been a problem with this game's exploration, but now having played other games with no stamina restrictions and overall better movement, it has made me not want to spend all this time running around at the pace of a snail when I come back to Genshin. Also, I have a personal issue that goes beyond just Natlan when it comes to the world of the game. Can we start getting different colors outside of different shades of green, yellow and brown? I am supposed to be playing a fantasy game, not reality. Put some creativity and make each nation actually feel different from the rest. I shouldn't be second guessing myself if I am in Fontaine or Mondstadt. It might be seen as a cliché, but just use the main color of the element as the main color for the nation of the said element. Make red areas all over Natlan. Make Fontaine blue. Make Snezhnaya white or lighter blue. Opening the world map and basically only seeing green feels boring and uninteresting. It worked during 1.0 because there was only Mondstadt and Liyue. To this day, Inazuma remains the most unique nation, because at least for Inazuma, there are some purple areas here and there that makes it stand out from everything else. So, going back specifically to Natlan, having the aesthetic of this land of war be so different compared to what the story was hyping it up to be doesn't just hurt the nation itself, but our playable characters as well. If Natlan is supposed to be tribal in nature, why does Kinich have digital abilities? Why is Shiwoen centered around roller skating? Why exactly is the Archon of a tribal nation riding a motorcycle? If you really wanted them to be so technologically advanced, show us that in the map itself, not just the abilities. You could have just plagiarized Wakanda. Natlan is also based around Africa, so just do what Marvel did in 1966 and make them a nation of tribal warriors that at the same time are highly technologically advanced. But it goes beyond just abilities. Their designs are just straight up weird. There are tribal aspects, I will give them that, but does Mualani, Kachina, Kinich, Ororon, Jiwoen, even Mavuika herself give off the feel of a warrior? These guys are supposed to be the heroes of the current era, Yet, the designs certainly don't show it. I have literally seen 6th graders wear the exact same style of clothing Kenichi is wearing. I am sure Mihoyo could have done better. Well, yet again, Raiden wears just a yukata, so maybe I'm giving them too much credit. And the worst of them, sadly, is Mavuika. What exactly does a woman in a femme fatale leather bodysuit with a zipper going around it that rides a motorcycle has to do with Natlan, Natlan's aesthetic, or Mavuika as a character? Even if I am not the biggest fan of the Archon designs overall, you can clearly see what nation they represent or what their personality is like. Both Venti and Raiden have clothes associated with their real-world counterparts. Zhongli, whilst not exactly similar to the rest of Liyue or China, as the god of contracts, him wearing a suit gives off his more sophisticated nature, almost kind of giving the look of a lawyer. Nahida has the design of a little fairy, and considering her whole story, a dream fairy is pretty much what she is. Furina has an exaggerated theater or stage play outfit, and since almost all of Fontaine was set up in a de facto theater, as well as her own story being about having to play as the Archon for thousands of years, it makes sense for her to wear these clothes. So, what does Mavuika have to do with a leather bodysuit that has a crotch zipper? Originally, when I first saw it in the trailer, I thought that she might be a lot more brutish, wild and fierce, so the outfit will probably reflect that, but in actuality, she is kind and well spoken throughout the whole story, so having her wear this bodysuit outside for gooning purposes of course, is useless because it does absolutely nothing for her character. And finally, we come to the story itself. First and foremost, I want to start with the positives. Omedetou, Mihoyo! You finally had a comparatively good character dev in Genshin. Omedetou! The captain dying is probably the best portion of this story. It wasn't spectacular, however, it was a million times better than Signora, and that was simply because I got to spend some time with the guy before he died. I actually got to learn about him, about his past, what he stood for, his motives. The way he died was, for me at least, satisfying. And currently, he might be my favorite character in the story, just for the sole reason of me knowing who this guy even is and him having a pretty much completed arc, something a lot of people in this game do not and likely will never have, compared to Signora, who theoretically should have had more screen time than the captain, just appeared for 5 minutes twice in Mondstadt and Liyue, then came to Inazuma, had a fight with us, and then she died. She didn't have any story or impact in the story, so I didn't have any feelings towards her being gone. Well, that's sort of a lie. She did have a backstory in the artifact description. Did you know there were artifact descriptions and stories inside of them? I certainly didn't until very recently. So yeah, first good dev in Genshin. Omedetou! Next, all of chapter 4. The way they managed to make me feel like we were in an actual war against the Abyss was really good, and I only wish they have done the same thing in Inazuma. It would have massively benefited from having something similar during that Archon quest, having to rush from place to place, help people push back the Abyss monsters, helping people push back against the Abyss, whilst at the same time seeing how no matter what you did, the map was getting slowly overrun. This whole section was amazing. I have almost zero complaints about that portion, except for the Abyss monsters themselves. You are really telling me that a company that makes millions of dollars off of selling Raiden alone cannot make any new Abyss monster designs aside from the wolves that have been in the game since Inazuma, and also just getting the new dinosaur models and putting a purple filter over them. 6 years ago, I expected and overlooked this level of reuse of assets during the Honkai Impact 3rd era, when Mihoyo was actually a smaller company. Not anymore though. How am I supposed to believe that Shiwoen or Chaska are having trouble with the Abyss when they just look like the dinosaurs around Natlan that I have been killing for the past 10 hours? Another positive is that their story presentation has really upgraded, with different camera angles, new facial expressions, and even some new model rigs for special actions. I know that I am praising the bare minimum here, but when the usual was just character animation 1, character animation 2, character animation 1 again, you tend to praise any and all improvement. Thankfully, Genshin did manage to keep me engaged throughout and not make me want to have sweet or roll off with a shotgun's barrel, unlike when I played HSR. Also, do you remember the Traveler having the gimmick of purifying abyssal energy that they did once before with Duvalen's tears? Well, after 5 years, they finally do it again in Natlan, after the writers finally remembered that she had this ability. That was pretty neat. And that's about it with the positives. Everything else borders around not good but inoffensive to straight up atrocious. Firstly, I know this isn't MiHoYo's doing, but some voice actors were missing in the later acts of the story. I am putting this in the wallest of my problems because this issue is mostly outside of Genshin's control. However, it does lower the experience of the product. When characters such as Kinich, Yansan, and the Traveler of all people stayed mute for the final act of the story. Moving on from things that were uncontrollable, guess what still remains even 5 years later? The annoyingly prolonged dialogues this game loves to use. Can we stop writing a whole novel when just simply having the character say, "I am thirsty, can I get some water?" would have done just fine, unnecessarily making a story that can be told in 8 hours at most take up to 15. Keep in mind, Natlan really is around 15 hours long, yet in those 15 hours we learn almost nothing. Amazing games have begun and ended in far less time. Aside from the prolonged dialogue, there are portions of the story that should either not exist at all or have been majorly hurt by the writing style of Genshin. Take the portion with Atia in Act 1, the portion with Vichama before going to save Kachina in Act 2, or the festival party at the beginning of Act 5, there is absolutely no reason either of these 3 portions should have taken an hour to complete. And even if the scene I'm looking at is important to the story, because of the long-winded dialogues, I lose almost all interest. I'm 100% certain that if given to a competent writer, Natlan's story can be told in half the time without losing anything of importance. And not only did portions of the story feel irrelevant, characters themselves did as well. In the 15 hours of Natlan's Archon quest, can you tell me what exactly Kinich, Chaska, and Yansan's role were outside of being plot devices for the 6 heroes? Kachina and Mualani had big roles in the first 2 acts, Citlali and especially Ororon had the spotlight for Act 3 and 4, Jiloen was tasked with making our name, so she also had something to do throughout the narrative, but for the 3 above, they felt like fewer, additional sprinkles for the already complete cake. However, these sprinkles only made me enjoy the cake less because they took the flavor away from the actually interesting and developing characters by taking away their screen time. Chaska's only thing was having a sister who we spent a total of 5 minutes with. Said sister later died during the Abyss invasion with almost no reaction on my side because I barely even knew her, and then said dead sister came to help us during the final battle. You know, this description sounds incredibly similar to that one old NPC in Inazuma. Probably a coincidence. Even characters that mattered are underwhelming. For me, the Archon plays a big role in whether I enjoyed the Archon quest or not. I loved Fontaine mainly because of Furina, objectively the currently best written character in the game. But on the other side, Raiden, a character I waited for so long because she was an XP of an actually well-written character, turned Inazuma single-handedly in my least liked arc. Nahida managed to help me overlook some of the lower parts of Sumeru, and Venti to this day makes me wish that the Mondstadt quest was longer because I enjoyed him that much as a character. Mavuika is on the lower end. Nothing will ever be worse than Raiden, but Mavuika manages to be something I wish to never see in stories. Ameri Siu. This character is the definition of perfect. She is the strongest, she is the wisest, she is the one that out of every Archon has had pretty much zero personality flaws, her enemy respects and begins to agree with her almost immediately, her plan that she was making for 500 years is executed flawlessly, and that one especially I will never forgive. Me personally, the moment a story has a war coming or a big world-saving mission and they make a plan for it, I am immediately expecting something to go wrong at some point in the story. I want stakes in what I'm watching. It's good to have a plan, but it's even better if that plan falls apart and the story becomes a game of push and pull between the heroes and the villains. If nothing fails, then why should I feel afraid of anything happening to these characters, be it now or in the future? But because this is Genshin Impact, and the only time the story had even a smidge of stakes was in Fontaine, Mavuika enters the Night World, kills the Abyss with the power of friendship, yet another disgusting trope, and everyone lives happily ever after. Well, you know, except for the captain. He wasn't going to be a gacha character you can pay for, and we can't just have Mavuika die as a consequence of pulling off her plan, right? She wouldn't sell as well if she was dead. Include to that how the argument between Mavuika and the captain about dealing with the ley lines, a genuinely interesting plotline between two opposing sides that want the same result but with drastically different methods, was resolved in a minute by Mavuika with almost zero resistance from the captain. At how everyone seems to love Mavuika, how she never shows emotion outside of determination, her disastrous design that feels out of place from everybody else introduced in Genshin so far, and a motorcycle for some reason, you have one of the worst characters that somehow managed to get more screen time than 70% of the cast. I'm sure it was too difficult for Mihoyo to make a scene between Mavuika and her sister, where she finally lowers her guard as the Archon and shows genuine emotion, making me believe that she is more than just a robot, but that would have been asking for too much, I guess. Since the main Archon quest is over, characters like Kenichi and Hyunsan will never have a major spotlight in the story to develop ever again, because the next updates until Snezhnaya will be most likely fewer. Sadly, this is a recurring problem that is never going to disappear due to how this game is actually made. Every nation you will have at least 10 new characters, from which at least 3 will never have any development outside the bare minimum. You have the new Archon, the new waifu bait, the 2 or 3 important side characters, and a Fatui Harbinger. All of them cannot realistically have equal amount of screen time. So, entering a new nation, you better start hoping your favorite character falls into the important side character category during the Archon quest, or else the only thing you will ever know about them is their name and their profession. God forbid a character releases from a nation that has already completed its main Archon quest. They might as well not exist. This change of cast members gets repeated so frequently that after 5 years, you open the character archive menu, see the 93 unique characters, and ask yourself, who are these people? Who is Albedo? Who is Yua? Who is Shenhe? Who is Yawan? Who is Ito? Why do they even exist? This whole problem could have been very easily prevented if Genshin was about a smaller group of characters going on this journey and the story only revolved around them, with maybe adding new characters here and there, like the Archons, Fatui, and at most 2 new major side characters per nation. If you worry about gacha, you can just make transformations or new forms of already existing characters. This way, the Traveler could have finally had a new form every nation that actually didn't suck ass, and set forms could have meant something to the story, instead of just pumping out 50 new Gunnar bait characters that serve almost nothing to the narrative. It's not as if I'm suggesting something impossibly outrageous. Mihoyo has already done this exact same thing twice. With this type of storytelling, you would even be allowed to kill off a character whilst giving them a final transformation in order to milk their final moments. Mihoyo has also done that on multiple occasions. Finally, whilst not entirely just a not one problem, there is something that has been bothering me for quite a while. Do any of you remember what the main purpose of our adventure even is? I think we were searching for our sibling or something like that. The traveler certainly seems to have forgotten, considering they haven't asked anything about their sibling in the past few nations. I wouldn't blame the traveler for forgetting, considering that every time we have previously asked for help, the answer always was, "Thank you all so very much for saving our nation, but we have absolutely zero clue where your brother is. Better work next time." Up until Inazuma, our main goal was always to find the Archon of said nation in order to ask for our sibling. The traveler even got annoyed at first when Ayaka wanted him to join their fight, yet after Inazuma, the traveler seems to have begun to care less and less. Thus far, only Nahida gave us any actual information about the main plotline of this whole game, but that's it. But what about the story featuring Dainsleif? They progressed the main plotline? Yeah, originally, yet in the past 3 years, I learned more about a single hill churl than I did about my brother. I would say it is comical, but at this point, it's just genuinely sad. Every step forward I see in this game narratively, they somehow manage to instantly fall back down 15 steps, making me depressed, realizing that Genshin will never reach its full potential. If you don't like it, then don't play it, is something you will often hear as a defense from the fans when someone is complaining about their favorite game. But the fact is, I want to love this game too. Call it Stockholm Syndrome, call it willful ignorance, but I know what MiHoYo is capable of. Get ready now, I'm about to mention the one who shall not be named in the Genshin community, but Honkai Impact 3rd story far surpasses anything MiHoYo has done in both Genshin and Honkai Star Rail. I know the heights they can reach, the beautiful character arcs, the intimidating villains who actually stay in the story for longer than 30 minutes, the actual stakes, the relationship between characters that have been building throughout the years, the satisfying endings, and so much more. Originally, way back when, before even Inazuma came out, I defended Genshin, saying how Honkai Impact 3rd also had a rocky start, but it got substantially better in a year, when Chapter 9 released, and Chapter 9 was just the climax of that arc. It was already improving by Chapter 6. Then, a year passed for Genshin and we got Inazuma, one of the worst things MiHoYo has ever written, but I still kept believing. Another year went by, then another. Then another. With small steps, I saw a light of hope for things to get better. But then I realized that 5 years have already gone by. Do you know what happened in Honkai Impact 3rd story after 5 years? It ended. Part 1 was complete, Part 2 might have even started at that point. One of the best gaming narrative experiences I have had, and certainly the best gacha story by a long shot, ended in 5 years, whilst at the same time Genshin, with around 60 hours of just Archon quests, feels like it has barely started, let alone reaching its conclusion. But as the saying goes, ignorance is bliss. You will never know how badly you are treated if you never knew how the same people that have been spitting on you for years are treating others. Like genuinely, look back at everything and ask yourself, has the traveler changed at all? Has Paimon changed at all? Has their relationship changed at all? And I am mainly using them as the example because they are our only constant. Maybe they have, slightly, but not by much. Not by 5 years worth. The same way we started at Mondstadt is pretty much the same way we are now in Natlan. And sadly, that goes for 99% of the characters as well. I cannot keep forcing myself to have faith in a game whose own developers do not seem to give two shits about. I will finish the story, might as well at this point, but I will not keep deluding myself into believing things will get any better. I am just hoping they won't get any worse. Well, until next year, can't wait to see how they do my home region.
Where am I?
You don't know where you are?
No.
You're in Bulgaria.